Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. I think I'm going to buy you like a $25 microphone and send it your way.
What's wrong with this microphone?
Nothing. It just sounds like you're in a closet talking to a computer.
I am in a closet with my computer.
I know.
It should sound like that. I don't have one of these Rush Limbaugh microphones like you have.
You ready for this?
You know, I think I probably can take up your 10 minutes pretty easily. And, you know, if you wanted to go for another 10 hours, I could probably do that. But
it's been 84 years.
We'll try to rush this puppy through in 10 minutes for you, 10 or 15. I've narrowed the scope down to try to keep it pretty quick and easy. This will be more of an introduction. If you have any reaction, we can expand on it.
Perfect. Well, you're welcome to start whenever you're ready.
Okay, so the subject today I thought I'd talk about is rules. We all live by rules. If you play golf, there's a set of rules. The NFL has rules, and if they want to change them, they have a rules committee, and the rules committee changes the rules, and the teams vote on it, and the rules are changed. Now, a very important thing is we have elections, and we have rules for elections. Now, the kind of an unusual thing is that the rules from state to state are different. Now, why is that? Why don't all the states have the same rules? If all the teams in the NFL have the same rules, why don't all the states? And that's because all of this is controlled by something we call the U.S. Constitution. And the Constitution has two sections that it talks about federal elections and how the rules will be set. So let me quote from you. Article 1, Section 4, quoting, says, "The times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the state legislature thereof. But the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations, except as to the place for choosing senators." Now, that was the case, but then we had the 17th Amendment, which modified how senators were elected and said they get elected just like representatives. So Congress actually can control. Now, the way that works is the state sets up the rules, and then if the Congress doesn't like them, they can change them. But here's the interesting thing. It says the power is given to the state legislature. It does not refer to other branches of government or a legislative process. It doesn't say they have to pass a law. But with Congress, it says Congress must pass a law. So that means that they got to go through the process and the president can veto it or approve it. So there's a little difference there in how that works. And that's really going to be the issue that I'm going to get to pretty soon, is when the founders said the state legislature, did they mean the state legislature or did they mean the legislative process? And this is what we call the doctrine of independent state legislature. Question is, does the state legislature alone have the power, or do other actors or agencies within the state get to play the game? Okay, Article 2, Section 1 says each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled to in Congress. And that's the electoral college. That's where you got to get 270 electoral votes to be the president. So again, the Constitution says the state legislature. It doesn't say legislative process. Now, this got to be an issue back with Gore versus Bush in the year 2000, because the state of Florida was the last state standing, and the state had called the election for Bush. Gore conceded, and then Gore changed his mind, filed a lawsuit, and we had Gore v. Bush lawsuit. And the problem that occurred into that was Gore filed the lawsuit with the state court in Florida, and the state court interjected itself and it started changing the rules. So the question is, did the court actually have standing to change the rules? Because the Constitution doesn't mention the courts. It mentions the state legislature. So that's where the term, the doctrine of independent state legislature. So what happened again in the year 2020, which has been very controversial, was that they went into the election season and they had the rules about when the mail-in ballots could come in and what identification marks had to be on the ballot, the signatures and that. And what happened was state courts interjected themselves and said, okay, no, the election doesn't end on election day. We can count ballots for the next week or 2 weeks. And in one state, they said, no, the signatures don't have to match. They can just be a mark, and that can be okay. So there again, the courts were changing the rules that the state legislature had established. So that's the question that we're confronted with. Now, very interestingly, this issue is now going to come before the Supreme Court. No, the Supreme Court would not take this issue up in 2020 in the middle of the election because they did not want to be accused of putting their thumb onto the scale and giving one side or the other the benefit of it. But now they can do it because no election is underway, and they can make the rules up and everybody knows the rules going in. And these rules will be applicable to all states, whatever the Supreme Court does when they interpret whether or not the state legislature has the plenary power to make the rules. Can the courts come in? Can the Secretary of State come in, as they did in some states? Can the Attorney General come in, as they did in some states? Can the governor come in, as they did in some states? So this particular case is Moore versus Harper. It's a case from North Carolina, which the Supreme Court has agreed to hear in the next session. This particular case was raised because the state legislature of North Carolina redistricted based on to the 2020 census. As you know, each state does redistricting every 10 years when a new census is taken. The state legislature redistricted. The state court interjected themselves and says, we don't like the way you redistricted and we're going to change it. And the state has now filed a case with the Supreme Court to determine whether or not this doctrine of the independent state legislature can follow the Constitution and set the times, places, and manners of holding elections. Do they have that power, or is that power shared by other agencies in the state? So that's the real important question. And that case is, if it's really taken to its ultimate and the Supreme Court addresses it, will have a resounding effect across the nation, because we have some states that say, okay, you have to have a photo ID, and some states say, no, you don't. And the state legislature says, yes, you do. And then somebody sues the state legislature and they go to the court, and the state court says, oh, no, you don't. And then it gets appealed up to the state Supreme Court. And from the state Supreme Court, it goes to the U.S. Supreme Court. It doesn't go through the appellate. It goes from state Supreme Court to the U.S. Supreme. So it's a very important question that needs to be answered. Who gets to make the rules? Because, as I've said many times in the past, if somebody can unilaterally on their own change the rules in the middle of the game, then there are no rules. And when there are no rules, we have anarchy. There you go. That's my little bit for the day. Remember the case name, Moore versus Harper. It's going to be a very important case. It'll probably not be heard until maybe November or December, but the ruling will not apply to the 2022 election. I do not think that they will hurry it along, because the election season will be pretty ripe. They don't really go into session until October, and the states will have been moved along, and there will be absentee balloting and everything by then. So this will have a very important impact in 2024, the next time we have a presidential election. Questions?
Questions. What is your feeling of how the Supreme Court you think will rule? I know there'll be a lot of pressure, political pressure.
I'm an originalist. I believe the best way the Supreme Court rules, whenever they rule, is that they go back to the four corners of the document and don't get creative in trying to say, here's what I thought they said, but rather look, what did they say? And that's what they said. Because when they talked about the Electoral College, they used the same terminology. They used the legislature. And that has been the way it has been, is the legislature picked the Electoral College. They didn't give Congress the right to change the state legislature on the Electoral College, but they did give Congress the right to change whatever the states said on the senators and the representatives. So I think the founders thought their way through. They used that terminology, and they used it for that particular purpose.
Yeah, I agree. But I think the problem is that in today's world, I'm not sure if all those Supreme Court justices care about that.
Well, I have to tell you, they may have got a little backbone demonstrated when they did the Dobbs case and they overturned Roe versus Wade, which was not predicated on constitutional law, but was a political decision made.
Yeah.
In my opinion, and other people, including Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who said that Roe versus Wade was not based on good, sound constitutional law.
Right.
You know, she definitely agreed with the result, but she didn't agree with how they got there.
But that was also during a time where protesting at a justice house was probably seen as no way in hell that would ever happen, where we're having that in today's world where justices are being like the cartel, what the cartel do to their justices if they protest and squeeze and pressure them. And I'm just not sure. I don't have a lot of faith in the Supreme Court. I just don't.
The thing is, this case is more of an intellectual exercise rather than an emotional exercise. It is not a case that hits people individually, but hits them as a group.
Right.
The abortion case is one that people could invest themselves personally into it and could do silly and crazy things that they probably won't do with this. This battle will be fought out primarily with the amicus briefs that people file and that sort of thing. I do not think that this will have the emotional, but it will have a much more resounding impact than what Roe versus Wade did. But Dobbs, because Dobbs did not outrule abortion. It just said it goes back to the states, and you could do that under, the 10th Amendment, which says anything that they don't give the power to Congress to do goes to the states. And it sure didn't give the power to the Supreme Court, because it didn't give any enumerated powers to the Supreme Court except for cases of admiralty and cases of disputes between the states. And when the case of an impeachment, the Chief Justice sat as the judge in an impeachment hearing. The specifics are outlined. It didn't give them the Supreme Court the power to legislate from the bench. And that's been sort of the problems that most people have complained about. When it went against the conservatives, they complained that it was an activist court. And now that they did the Dobbs case, the liberals claim that this is an activist court. When it goes against you, it's an activist court. That's right. That's kind of the underlying rule that people follow.
Yeah. I find that the people on the left will find a way to make it emotional. Well, they'll say something about these racist white people trying to create voting laws so that the marginalized communities can't get out and vote, or they'll be suppressed due to gerrymandering, or I don't know, they'll make up something.
This issue is not about what the rules are. This issue is about who gets to make the rules.
Right.
And so the states will make the rules one way or the other. The question is, will these other agencies have a say? And I think the big issue is, will the courts be able to weigh in on what the state legislature does? Already in some states, the state legislature passes a law and the governor signs it. And the question then is, if it's a law, can it be changed? And my absolute reading of the Constitution, and I'm an originalist, says if the state legislature can let the governor sign off on the legislation if they can give him the power to do that or the right to do it. If they've got plenary power, if they give it, they can take it. If it's yours to give, you can also be yours to take away.
Yeah.
And because the Constitution doesn't change. Even if the state passes a law, that does not change what the Constitution says.
Well, I think it's very exciting. I want it to happen. And the more well-established rules we have, the better. Because the people in my generation definitely feel that voting, they just feel like it's not fair based on whoever wins. It doesn't matter who wins. If a Republican wins or a Democrat wins, somebody cheated somehow. And the more security we feel towards our elections, the better we'll be as a country. And so I'm excited about that.
Jimmy Carter and another panel of experts after the election in 1980, Reagan appointed Jimmy Carter, and there were other well-known national figures, to a commission to examine how to make our election secure. And the bottom line that came out of that was mail-in balloting was ripe with corruption and was the worst thing could happen. The rest of the world has virtually eliminated mail-in ballots. And they don't have election weeks, election months. They have election day.
Right.
France is much larger than our states. It's a country, widespread, but they are able to come up with a result by 10 o'clock on election day. Why can't each state come up with a result? Because the states do their elections individually. It may be a national election, but the state's doing it individually. If France as a country can do it in one day, why can't a state do it in one day?
Yep. That is always the question any logical thinking person has. This is like,
so there you go. So that's my soapbox for today. Okay. is the doctrine of independent state legislature. And that's a very interesting question. And I've long fought with people over this. In fact, I've written papers for people running for Congress to try to inform them so that should any of their constituents ask them a question, they won't have to wild guess their way through it. I will say this. None of the congressmen I've written this information for and provided them has ever had a constituent smart enough to ask the question. And that's kind of sad.
That's always it's not knowing the right answer. It's knowing the right question.
Yes, that's most important.
Yeah.
If you don't ask the right question, you don't have a chance at all of getting the right answer. Okay. Anything else today there, Chief Cook and Bottle Washer?
No.